Hey guys, welcome back to the DAHKTUBE. And before we get started, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Now, today we'll be doing the principle of mathematical induction, otherwise known as PMI. So mathematical induction is a method of mathematical proof that is used to establish that a general statement, quote-unquote proposition, is true for all natural numbers. All right, so there are 6 stages or 6 steps for mathematical induction. So these are the steps. Step 1 is called the proposition. So a statement that is to be proven. Step 2 is called our base case. So we must prove that the statement is true for at least one value of n. Usually that value is n equal 1. Step 3, induction assumption. Assume that the statement holds true for an arbitrary value of n, usually denoted as k. That means n is equal to k. Step 4, induction hypothesis. If the statement is true for n equal k, then the statement is true for n equal k plus 1. Step 5, the proof of an induction hypothesis. So now we need to prove that the statement is actually true for n equal k plus 1. And then step 6 is our conclusion. So the statement is true when n equal 1, n equal k, and n equal k plus 1. All right, so these are some notations that we usually use. So P subscript n is the proposition involving n, where n is in the positive integers. P subscript 1, a statement obtained from Pn, where n is equal to 1. Pk, a statement obtained from Pn, where n is equal to k. Pk plus 1, a statement obtained from Pn, where n is equal to k plus 1. Or Pk plus 1 is a statement obtained from Pk after adding the k plus 1th term. Now, instead of Pn, P subscript n, we can have P bracket n, or we can have S subscript n or S bracket n. So these are just the notation that we use. Okay, so let's say we have this example here. Prove that the sum of the first n natural numbers is equal to half n, open bracket, n plus 1, close bracket. So the first thing you want to do is you want to do a proposition. And you're going to let your proposition be denoted as Pn. And it says the sum of the first n natural numbers. That means you start counting from 1. So natural numbers are counting numbers. So that would be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus that plus n. Because you don't know what n is, so you don't want to keep on going, and you don't know when to stop. And it is equal to half n plus 1. So that's a proposition. Then your base case, that is when P1, so n is now 1. So you'd have 1 is equal to, anywhere you see n, you're substituting 1. Half times 1, 1 plus 1. So 1 is equal to half times 1 times 2. So 1 is equal to 1. So the left-hand side of the equation is equal to the right-hand side of the equation. And that means P1 is true when n is equal to 1. So that's the first 2 steps. So your left-hand side must be equal to your right-hand side. And usually it is when n is equal to 1. And that's where you assume that n is equal to k. So that would be Pk. So it's 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus that. Where you had n, you're now going to put k is equal to half k plus 1. So here we assume n equal k is true. So now we have our induction hypothesis, and this is where you substitute n for k plus 1. So you'd have Pk plus 1. So you'd have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus ... plus k plus 1. And that would be equal to half k plus 1, k plus 1 plus 1. So where n was, you put in k plus 1. And you could simplify this and you'd have half k plus 1, k plus 2. So here you'd have, we need to prove n equal k plus 1 is true. So those are your first 4 steps. So now we have the proof of induction hypothesis. So what that is that's the pk term, which is your induction assumption, plus the k plus 1th term. And that is going to be equal to a half k plus 1. And if you look, this is your induction hypothesis, this is pk. And then you're adding k plus 1. So it's the pk, which is your induction assumption, plus the k plus 1 third. Then now when you simplify that, you're going to get half k plus 1, k plus 2. And you prove it. So let me show you how we got that. So if you expanded half k plus 1, k plus 2, which was your induction hypothesis, you get half k squared plus 2k plus k plus 2. That will give you half k squared plus 3k plus 2. Now, if we were supposed to expand this part, we would get half k squared plus k plus 2k plus 2 over 2, because you'd have to find the LCM. So when you now group, you'd have k squared plus 2k plus k plus 2, which is k squared plus 3k plus 2 all over 2. So you can always simplify this and simplify the induction hypothesis to actually see where it's coming from. So what we did, instead of showing all of this working, I just cut to the chase. And then you conclude. So by PMI, and then you use what they asked in the question. So by PMI, the sum of the first n natural numbers is equal to half n plus 1. And that would be a final answer. All right, so let's try another example. So it says, prove by PMI, which is mathematical induction, that for all n in natural, 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus n squared is equal to 1 over 6 n plus 1 times 2n plus 2. Let Pn be 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus ... n squared equal to 1 over 6n, n plus 1. So basically writing back the question. So now we're going to be doing our base case. So that's n equal 1. So focusing on this. So it'd have 1 squared is equal to 1 over 6 times 1, 1 plus 1, 2 times 1 plus 1. So 1 squared is equal to 1 over 6, 1, 2, 3. So 3, 2, 6. So it's 1 squared is equal to 1 over 6 times 6. So 1 is equal to 1. So our left-hand side is equal to our right-hand side. Therefore, true for n equal 1. So now we're going to do our induction assumption. That's where we say assume that it is true for n equal k. So that's pk, 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus k squared is equal to 1 over 6. So anywhere you see n, we put in k plus 1, 2k plus 1. So assume true for n equal k. So now we're going to have our induction hypothesis. So that's p k plus 1. That's 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus plus k squared plus k plus 1 squared is equal to 1 over 6 k plus 1 k plus 1 plus 1 2k plus 1 plus 1. So we can simplify this. It's 1 over 6 k plus 1 k plus 2 2k plus 2 plus 1, so that's 2k plus 3. True for n equal k plus 1. So for the proof of induction hypothesis, it would be the pk plus the k plus 1th term. And pk was 1 over 6 k plus 1, 2k plus 1, plus the k plus 1th term, which would be this here, which is k plus 1 squared. So if we found the LCM, we're going to get k plus 1, 2k plus 1, plus 6 times k plus 1 squared. So now we can simplify that. So we have 1 over 6 k plus 1 so we can put the k plus 1 here, and then we'd multiply throughout by everything else. Why? Because we have k plus 1 as one of our brackets. Then we'd have k times 2k plus 1 plus 6 times k plus 1. So if we simplify what's in the bracket, we get 2k squared plus k plus 6k plus 6. That's going to give us 1 over 6 k plus 1, 2k squared plus 7k plus 6. Then we can factor this. And if we factor it, we're going to get k plus 2, 2k plus 3, which is what we had up top initially. So you can look at what you have as the induction hypothesis to see what to do in the proof by induction to ensure that you get, because they have to be the same thing. You're proving that this is true. So now for our conclusion, true. Oh, here we have true for n equal k plus 1. Therefore, by PMI, the sum of the squares of the first n terms is equal to 1 over 6n, n plus 1, 2n plus 1. And that's your final answer. So thank you guys for staying tuned, and I'll see you guys next time on the DAHKTUBE.